As the sleek black Rolls-Royce disappeared down the driveway, the beautiful fiancée waved goodbye with her sweetest smile. She had no idea that the most powerful mafia boss in Chicago had never left the mansion. At that very moment, he was sitting in a secret room hidden behind a false wall in the library, his steel gray eyes fixed on 6 security monitors. He wanted to know how his fiancée would treat his 4-year-old daughter when she thought no one was watching. And in just 20 minutes, everything he had ever believed in crumbled completely. The sweet smile vanished the moment the door closed. The angelic face transformed into a cold stranger with calculating eyes. And the man who walked into the mansion just 20 minutes later was his most trusted financial manager. But that wasn't what made the most notorious mafia boss in the city tremble with rage. It was the moment he watched his fiancée storm into his daughter's room, tear apart the family drawing the little girl had just made, then raise her hand to slap the 4-year-old child who was crying and cowering in the corner of her bed. Her voice cut through the speakers like ice. "You're a burden. Everything would be so much easier without you." The pen in the mafia boss's hand shattered. Black ink stained his palm like the color of the fury boiling through his veins. But then, a small figure rushed onto the screen and made him freeze. The nanny he had walked past hundreds of times without ever truly seeing was shielding his daughter with her own body, taking blow after blow without fighting back. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth, yet she still held the child tight, her voice gentle as if she had never been hurt. "It's okay, Lily. It doesn't hurt. I promise." This girl was silently protecting his daughter with her very life, even though the price could be her own survival and that of her sick little sister waiting for heart surgery. And that was the moment the frozen heart of Chicago's coldest mafia boss stirred for the first time in 4 years since his wife had passed away. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button and share this video with someone you love. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the heartfelt stories we bring you every day. The secret room lay deep within the Romano mansion, hidden behind a false wall in the library that no one knew existed except Dante and Marcus. Pale blue light from 6 security monitors washed over the face of the most powerful mafia boss in Chicago, carving his features into lines as sharp as blades. This was the place where Dante had once sat for countless hours, tracking enemies, planning the destruction of rival families, orchestrating deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But today, his target was not an enemy from the outside. It was the woman sleeping in his bed, the woman he had placed a $3 million ring on her finger, the woman he was supposed to marry in just 3 weeks. Dante leaned back in the leather chair, his steel gray eyes never leaving the screens. His mind drifted to the words that had brought him here, words spoken by a dying man 3 months ago. Angelo had been more than his right hand. He had been his brother in everything but blood. They had grown up together on the streets of Chicago, had bled together, had built the Romano Empire together. And on the night Angelo was gunned down by assassins from a rival family, he had grabbed Dante's hand with his last breath and whispered something that haunted Dante ever since. "Watch how she treats Lily when she thinks no one is watching. That is her true face." Dante had wanted to dismiss those words as the ramblings of a dying man. Angelo had never liked Victoria. He had warned Dante from the beginning that something about her felt wrong, that her perfection was too polished, too rehearsed, but Dante had been blinded. After 4 years of raising Lily alone, after 4 years of watching his daughter grow up without a mother, he had desperately wanted to believe that Victoria could fill that void. But then the signs began to appear. Lily, who had once been curious and playful, started to withdraw. She stopped running to greet Dante when he came home. She flinched whenever Victoria entered the room, and whenever Dante asked what was wrong, his daughter would just shake her head and whisper, "Nothing, Daddy. I am fine." Those 2 words haunted him. "I am fine." The same words Isabella used to say when she was hiding her pain. So Dante had devised a plan. He announced a business trip to Las Vegas, made sure everyone in the mansion knew he would be gone for a week. He watched Victoria kiss him goodbye with tears in her eyes, telling him how much she would miss him. And then he had slipped into this room through a passage only he and Marcus knew about. The wedding was 3 weeks away. 3 weeks until Victoria Ashford would become Victoria Romano, with full access to his fortune, his empire, his daughter. Dante's fingers tightened around the armrest until his knuckles turned white. On the monitors, he could see Victoria standing at the front door, waving at the Rolls-Royce disappearing down the driveway. Her smile was radiant, perfect, loving. He had prepared himself for the truth. He had told himself that whatever he discovered, he would face it with the cold rationality that had made him the most feared man in Chicago. But nothing could have prepared him for what would happen in the next 20 minutes. The moment the front door closed, Victoria's sweet smile vanished, as if someone had flipped a switch. The warmth drained from her eyes, replaced by something cold and calculating that Dante had never seen in the entire year he had spent beside her. She pulled out her phone and dialed with impatient fingers. Dante adjusted the audio system, and her voice rang out clearly through the speakers in the secret room. He is gone. Finally gone. Get here now. Not darling, not Dante, just he, as if he were nothing more than a chess piece on her board. Dante sat motionless, his jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. 20 minutes passed in suffocating silence, and then a familiar car appeared at the mansion gates, the sleek black Audi that Dante had given his financial manager as a Christmas bonus last year. Richard Cole stepped out, his eyes darting around nervously before he hurried toward the entrance. The way he moved, cautious and secretive, told Dante everything he needed to know even before the man crossed the threshold. The main hall camera captured what happened next in perfect clarity. Victoria ran to Richard and threw her arms around him. Their lips met with the desperate hunger of lovers who had been forced to hide for too long. They kissed right there in the center of the grand hall, beneath the crystal chandelier that had cost Dante $200,000. In the very spot where Dante had gone down on one knee 6 months ago. In the very spot where Victoria had cried tears of joy and whispered, "I am the happiest woman in the world." The memories flooded back like poison. Every tender moment, every loving glance, every whispered promise in the dark. All of it had been a performance. Every tear, every smile, every vow of eternal love. 1 year. He had lived with a snake for 1 year without ever knowing. Dante's hand curled into a fist, his nails digging into his palm until blood began to seep through his fingers. But he did not move. He had survived 17 years in the underworld by never acting on impulse. He needed to know everything before he struck. On the screen, Victoria pulled back from the kiss and let out a dramatic sigh. Her voice dripped with irritation as she spoke to Richard. "I am so sick of this. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is? Smiling when I want to scream, saying I love you when all I feel is disgust, pretending that his bratty daughter matters to me." Richard stroked her hair soothingly. "Just a little longer. After the wedding, everything will be easier." "Easier?" Victoria laughed bitterly. "I have been playing the perfect fiancé for a full year. I deserve an Oscar for this performance." Dante watched them settle onto the red velvet sofa, the one he had imported from Italy as a birthday gift for Victoria. They looked comfortable, relaxed, as if they owned the place. But infidelity was only the tip of the iceberg. What made Dante truly descend into hell was what they discussed next. Richard opened his leather briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents, spreading them across the coffee table with the confidence of a man who had gotten away with everything. "The transfers are complete," he said, his voice low even though they believed they were alone. $15 million moved to the Swiss accounts over the past 8 months. Small amounts each time, nothing that would trigger any alarms. Dante has no idea. Victoria picked up one of the papers, scanning it with satisfaction. And the property transfers? Already forged his signature on 6 of them. By the time anyone realizes what happened, we will be long gone. Dante felt his blood turn to ice. 15 million. Richard had stolen $15 million from him, right under his nose. The man he had trusted with his entire financial empire. The man who had sat at his dinner table, who had played with Lily, who had called him brother. But the betrayal of money was nothing compared to what came next. Victoria set down the documents and leaned back against the sofa, her eyes taking on a cruel glint. "What about the brat?" "Lily?" Richard asked. "Who else?" Victoria's lip curled with disgust. "After the wedding, I want her gone. We will discover that she has psychological problems, trauma from losing her mother, inability to bond, whatever sounds convincing. Then we ship her off to a boarding school in Switzerland. Somewhere remote, somewhere Dante will be too busy to visit." She paused, and her next words made Dante's heart stop beating. "The child looks at me with her mother's eyes. I hate it. Every time I see her face, I see that dead woman staring back at me. I want her out of my sight." Richard nodded slowly. "And Dante?" Victoria smiled, and it was the coldest thing Dante had ever seen. Accidents happen all the time in his line of work. A car bomb, a rival family seeking revenge, a deal gone wrong. Within 2 years, everything he owns will belong to us. She laughed softly, the sound like glass shattering in the silent room. The great Dante Romano, the most feared mafia boss in Chicago. And he has no idea that his own fiancé and his trusted financial manager are planning his funeral. Richard shifted uncomfortably. "What about the nanny? That girl?" She looks at us strangely, like she knows something. Victoria waved her hand dismissively. Sienna? She is just a servant, a nobody. After the wedding, I will find some excuse to fire her. Maybe I will tell Dante she stole something. It does not matter. People like her are disposable. In the secret room, Dante sat frozen like a statue carved from stone. They did not just want his money. They wanted him dead. They wanted to destroy his daughter. They wanted to erase everything he had built over 17 years. And in that moment, the fires of hell blazed to life in the eyes of the mafia boss. Dante switched cameras, his heart still pounding with rage from what he had just witnessed. The screen now showed Lily's bedroom, bathed in the soft glow of a nightlight shaped like a butterfly. Victoria had already stormed out, leaving destruction in her wake. The torn pieces of Lily's drawing lay scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. And in the corner of the bed, his 4-year-old daughter was still trembling, her tiny body curled into a ball. But she was not alone. Sienna sat on the edge of the bed, her arms wrapped protectively around the little girl. Blood still trickled from the corner of her mouth where Victoria's blows had landed. Her cheek was swollen, already turning purple. Yet she held Lily as if the child were the most precious thing in the world. And then she began to sing. Her voice was soft and gentle, a lullaby that floated through the speakers and somehow reached into the darkness of the secret room. Dante did not recognize the melody, but there was something achingly familiar about it. Something that reminded him of Isabella singing to her belly when she was pregnant with Lily. The little girl's trembling slowly subsided. She lifted her tear-stained face and looked up at her nanny with eyes that shattered Dante's heart. "Miss Victoria hates me," Lily whispered. "Why does she hate me?" Sienna brushed the hair from Lily's forehead with infinite tenderness. "It is not your fault, sweetheart. Some grown-ups do not know how to love. There is something broken inside them that has nothing to do with you. But I tried to be good." Lily's voice cracked. "I drew her a picture. I put her in our family. I know, baby. I know." Sienna pulled her closer, resting her chin on top of the child's head. "But you have me. I will always be here. No matter what happens, I will never leave you." Lily clutched Sienna's shirt with her small fists. "Promise? I promise." They sat like that for a long time, Sienna rocking Lily gently while humming the lullaby. She wiped away every tear that fell, kissed the top of the child's head, and told her stories of brave princesses who faced dragons and always won. When Lily finally fell asleep, exhausted from crying, Sienna did not leave. She carefully tucked the blanket around the little girl and then settled into the chair beside the bed. Only then did she look down at her own injuries. Her arms were covered in bruises where Victoria had struck her. Her lip was split and still bleeding, but she did not cry. She just smiled softly, as if pain were an old friend she had grown accustomed to. In the secret room, Dante watched the screen for hours. He watched Sienna sit vigil beside his daughter's bed throughout the entire night, occasionally reaching out to stroke Lily's hair or adjust her blanket. And for the first time, he truly saw her. Who was this girl? Why could she love his daughter like this when she owed them nothing? Late that night, when the entire mansion had sunk into silence, Sienna finally left Lily's bedside. She made her way through the darkened hallways to the small basement room reserved for the household staff. The space was cramped, barely larger than a closet. A single bed, a tiny wardrobe, and an old wooden table with a cracked mirror. The ceiling hung so low she could almost touch it. But Sienna had never complained. She had lived in places far worse than this. She sat on the edge of the bed, her body aching from the beating she had taken. From her pocket, she pulled out a worn photograph, its edges yellowed and soft from years of handling. 2 children smiled back at her. Noah, with his bright eyes and gap-toothed grin. Emma, barely 4 years old, clutching a stuffed rabbit that had lost most of its fur. They looked happy in that picture. They looked like children who still believed the world could be kind. Sienna traced their faces with her fingertip, and the memories came flooding back like a river she could not dam. She was 5 years old the first time she understood what true evil looked like. Her stepfather Frank had come home drunk, as he did most nights. Her mother Maria had said something wrong, something that made his face twist with rage. Sienna remembered hiding behind the kitchen door, watching through the crack as Frank beat her mother with his fists. Maria was pregnant then. 7 months along with a baby brother Sienna had already named in her heart. That night, her mother lost the baby on the kitchen floor, and Frank had simply stepped over the blood and walked to the refrigerator to get another beer. By the time Sienna was 7, she had learned that her mother's night shifts at the factory meant she would be alone with Frank, and Frank had begun to notice her in ways that made her skin crawl. The beatings started small: a slap for spilling milk, a punch for being too loud, a kick for existing in his space. By 10, the abuse had evolved into something far darker, something that still made Sienna wake up screaming in the middle of the night, something she could never speak about, not even to herself. Her mother knew. Sienna had seen it in Maria's eyes, the guilt and the horror. But Maria was too broken, too terrified of Frank to protect her own daughter. All she could do was cry and whisper apologies that meant nothing. "I am sorry, baby. I am so sorry. I will get us out. I promise." Empty words, hollow promises. When Sienna was 12, she came home from school to find police cars parked outside their apartment. Her mother had jumped from the Harrison Street Bridge that morning. The only thing she left behind was a crumpled note with 2 words scrawled across it. "Forgive me." 12 years old, standing at the morgue, staring at her mother's broken body, Sienna had no tears left to cry. She did not know then that her hell had only just begun. After her mother's death, Sienna was swallowed by the foster care system, a 12-year-old girl with haunted eyes and a file full of tragedy. The social workers promised her safety. They promised her a fresh start. They lied. 7 families in 6 years. 7 houses that were never homes. 7 chapters of the same nightmare wearing different faces. The first family was merely neglectful, treating her like a ghost that drifted through their hallways. But the second family was where Sienna learned that monsters did not always look like her stepfather. Mr. Patterson was a respected accountant. He wore pressed suits and smiled at church every Sunday. He also crept into Sienna's room at night, his hands reaching for places that made her want to tear off her own skin. When she finally gathered the courage to report him, no one believed her. The social worker looked at her file, saw the troubled history, and decided she was just another damaged child seeking attention. "These are serious accusations," the woman had said coldly. "Mr. Patterson is an upstanding citizen. Perhaps you are confused." Sienna was moved to a new home within the week, not for her protection, but to protect the Pattersons from her lies. The fourth family had 3 biological children who saw Sienna as entertainment. They beat her for sport, locked her in the hallway closet for hours, and told their parents she was hurting herself for attention. She spent her 14th birthday curled in the darkness of that closet, counting the hours until someone remembered she existed. The 6th family was the worst in a different way. Mrs. Thornton did not hit her. She simply worked her like a slave. Cooking, cleaning, laundry, yard work. Sienna woke at 5 in the morning and collapsed at midnight. She was not a foster daughter. She was free labor. At 16, Sienna reached her breaking point. She sat in the bathroom of the Thornton house on a February night, a razor blade pressed against her wrist. The water in the tub was warm. The pain was almost comforting. For the first time in years, she felt in control of something. The cuts were deep. The blood was everywhere. She would have died if Mrs. Thornton had not needed to use the bathroom. Sienna woke up in a hospital 3 days later, her wrists wrapped in white bandages that could not hide the ugliness underneath. The scars would stay with her forever, 2 jagged lines that told the story of a girl who had given up. At 17, she ran. No plan, no money, no destination, just a desperate need to escape. She spent that winter on the streets of Chicago, sleeping under bridges and in abandoned buildings, eating from garbage cans when she could find nothing else. The temperature dropped to 20 degrees below zero. She thought she would die. Part of her hoped she would. Now, in the tiny room of the Romano mansion, Sienna looked down at the scars on her wrists. Tears slid silently down her cheeks in the darkness. She had wanted to die so many times, but every time, something pulled her back. Maybe it was hope. Hope that someday, life would get better. At 18, Sienna found her way to a homeless shelter on the south side of Chicago. A kind woman named Dorothy gave her a cot, a warm meal, and something she had not felt in years. Hope. She started studying for her GED, working 3 jobs to save every penny she could, washing dishes at a diner, cleaning offices at night, delivering packages on weekends. She never complained. She only knew she had to survive. Then came the night that changed everything. She was 20 years old, walking home after a late shift, when she heard crying beneath the Harrison Street Bridge, the same bridge where her mother had ended her life 8 years earlier. 2 children huddled together in the freezing darkness. A boy, maybe 6, with hollow cheeks and frightened eyes. A little girl, barely 4, clutching his arm and sobbing quietly. Noah and Emma, brother and sister, orphans of the streets, just like she had been. Sienna did not hesitate. She took them home that night, fed them, gave them her bed while she slept on the floor, and somehow, those 2 broken children became her family, the only family she had ever truly had. For 1 beautiful year, they were happy, poor but happy, crowded into a tiny apartment, eating rice and beans most nights, but laughing together, loving each other. Then Noah got sick, leukemia. The doctors delivered the diagnosis like a death sentence. Sienna dropped out of school immediately, dedicating every moment to his care. She sold her blood twice a week. She signed up for medical trials, letting strangers pump experimental drugs into her veins for $200 a session. It was never enough. Noah died in her arms on a bitter winter night. He was 8 years old. His last words still echoed in Sienna's mind every single day. "Do not cry, sissy. It does not hurt anymore." She had failed him, just like everyone had failed her. And now, history was repeating itself. Emma, her sweet 10-year-old Emma, had been diagnosed with a congenital heart defect. She needed surgery that cost $200,000. Without it, she would die within the year. That was why Sienna worked at the Romano mansion. The salary was higher than anywhere else. High enough that maybe, just maybe, she could save her sister. Sienna wiped her tears and picked up her phone. She dialed the familiar number and waited. Emma's weak voice came through after 3 rings. "Sissy? Hey, baby girl." Sienna forced herself to sound cheerful. "How are you feeling today?" "Tired, but okay." A pause. "Are you coming to visit me this weekend?" "Of course I am. I promise. I miss you, sissy. I miss you too. Sweetheart, so much." After she hung up, Sienna sat in the darkness, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. She cried the way she had cried for 10 years. Alone, in the dark, where no one could see, where no one could hear. In the secret room, Dante sat motionless before the monitors. His audio system had captured everything, the phone call, the muffled sobs, and for the first time in many years, the eyes of Chicago's coldest mafia boss stung with tears. Morning light flooded through the tall windows of the Romano mansion, but Victoria's mood was anything but bright. She had expected to find Lily withdrawn and broken after the previous day's lesson. She had expected the brat to be cowering in her room, afraid to show her face. Instead, she found something that made her blood boil. Lily was in the garden, laughing. The sound drifted up to Victoria's bedroom window like nails on a chalkboard. She looked down and saw the little girl chasing butterflies while Sienna watched from a nearby bench, a gentle smile on her bruised face. The nanny had defied her. After everything that happened yesterday, after Victoria had made it perfectly clear that Sienna was to stay away from Lily, the girl had ignored her orders completely. She was still caring for the child as if nothing had happened, as if Victoria's authority meant nothing. Rage burned through Victoria's veins as she stormed downstairs. She found Sienna in the hallway outside the kitchen, carrying a tray of breakfast for Lily. The nanny's lip was still swollen from yesterday's beating, and a purple bruise bloomed across her cheekbone, but she walked with her head held high, as if the marks of violence were badges of honor rather than shame. Victoria moved fast. She grabbed Sienna by the collar and slammed her against the wall. The tray clattered to the floor, scattering toast and fruit across the marble tiles. "Who do you think you are?" Victoria hissed, her face inches from Sienna's. "A servant daring to disobey her mistress?" Sienna met her gaze without flinching. There was no fear in those brown eyes, no submission, just a quiet, unshakable resolve that made Victoria want to scream. "My job is to take care of Lily," Sienna said calmly. "I will do that job." The first slap cracked across Sienna's face like thunder. Her head snapped to the side, but she did not cry out. Victoria hit her again, and again, each blow harder than the last. "You ungrateful little wretch." Victoria's voice shook with fury. "I gave you a job. I gave you a roof over your head. And this is how you repay me?" Sienna tasted blood in her mouth. Her cheek burned like fire, but she did not step back. She did not beg for mercy. She simply stood straight and looked Victoria directly in the eyes. In the secret room, Dante watched the scene unfold, his hands trembling with barely contained rage. He wanted to burst out of this room and tear Victoria apart with his bare hands. But Marcus's voice echoed in his earpiece. "Not yet, boss. We need more evidence." On the screen, Victoria stepped back, breathing hard. She stared at Sienna with a mixture of frustration and disbelief. No servant had ever looked at her like this. No one had ever refused to break. A cold smile slowly spread across Victoria's lips. "You think you are tough?" She laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "Fine. Let us see how tough you are when I go after what you love most." Victoria pulled out her phone and scrolled through it with deliberate slowness, her eyes never leaving Sienna's face. "Did you really think I would not investigate you?" Victoria's voice dripped with venom. A nobody who appeared out of nowhere, working in one of the wealthiest households in Chicago. I know everything about you, Sienna Cole. Sienna felt her blood run cold. The confidence she had clung to moments ago began to crack. Your pathetic little life story, the dead mother, the foster homes, the years on the streets. Victoria laughed softly. Quite the tragic tale. But that is not what interests me. She held up her phone, showing a photograph that made Sienna's heart stop beating. Emma, her sweet Emma, lying in a hospital bed with tubes connected to her small body. The photo had been taken recently, perhaps just days ago. Your sister, right? Emma Cole. 10 years old, congenital heart defect, needs surgery that costs $200,000. Victoria pronounced each word like a weapon. Currently staying at St. Mary's Children's Hospital on the south side, room 312. Sienna's hands began to tremble. For the first time since this confrontation began, fear crept into her eyes. Not fear for herself, fear for Emma. How do you know that? Sienna whispered. Victoria smiled the smile of a predator who had cornered its prey. I know people, powerful people. One phone call from me, and your precious sister will be thrown out of that hospital before sunset. No. The word escaped Sienna's lips like a prayer. Please, no. One more phone call after that, and I can make sure no hospital in Chicago will ever admit her. Victoria stepped closer, her voice dropping to a poisonous whisper. She will die on the streets, just like you almost did, and it will be all your fault. Something broke inside Sienna. All the strength she had built up over years of suffering crumbled in an instant. Emma was her weakness, her only weakness, the one thing in this world she could not bear to lose. She fell to her knees on the cold marble floor, tears streaming down her cheeks. Please, she begged, her voice cracking. Please do not hurt her. She is innocent. She is only 10 years old. She has nothing to do with this. Victoria looked down at her with triumph gleaming in her eyes. This was what she wanted. Complete submission, total surrender. Then keep your mouth shut, Victoria commanded. Do not see anything. Do not hear anything. Do not say anything. Whatever happens in this house, you are blind and deaf. Do you understand? Sienna nodded, her tears falling onto the marble like rain. Yes, she choked out. I understand. Good girl. Victoria patted her head mockingly, as if she were a dog that had finally learned to obey. Remember this conversation, because if you forget, Emma will pay the price. Victoria turned and walked away, her high heels clicking triumphantly against the floor. She had won. The stubborn little nanny had finally broken. She did not know that every word she had just spoken had been recorded, and the man listening had the power to turn her entire world into ashes. The mansion fell silent as midnight crept over Chicago. Victoria had retired to her room hours ago, satisfied with her victory. The servants had disappeared into their quarters. Even the guards outside seemed to melt into the shadows. But Sienna could not sleep. She lay on her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, Victoria's threats echoing in her mind. One phone call. That was all it would take to destroy Emma. One phone call to end the only family she had left. The smart thing would be to obey, to stay away from Lily, to pretend she was blind and deaf, just as Victoria commanded. But then she heard it. A small cry, muffled by walls and distance, but unmistakable to someone who had spent years listening for the sounds of frightened children. Lily was having a nightmare. Sienna did not hesitate. She slipped out of her room and made her way through the darkened hallways, her bare feet silent on the cold marble floors. She knew she was risking everything. She knew Victoria might find out, but some things mattered more than fear. She found Lily tangled in her blankets, tears streaming down her flushed cheeks, small hands reaching for someone who was not there. "Mommy," the little girl sobbed. "Mommy, please come back. Please do not leave me." Sienna's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. She crossed the room in 3 strides and gathered Lily into her arms, holding her tight against her chest. "Shh, sweetheart. I am here. You are safe." Lily clung to her, tiny fingers gripping Sienna's shirt with desperate strength. Her whole body trembled with the force of her sobs. Sienna began to sing. The same lullaby she had sung to Noah on his last night. The same melody that had followed him into the darkness, where pain no longer existed. Her voice was soft and steady, a gentle anchor in the storm of Lily's nightmare. Slowly, the trembling stopped. The sobs faded into hiccups, then into quiet breaths. Lily looked up at Sienna with red-rimmed eyes that held a question too heavy for any 4-year-old to carry. "Are you going to leave me too?" she whispered. "Everyone leaves me. Mommy left. Daddy is always gone. Miss Victoria hates me. Will you leave too?" Sienna cupped the little girl's face in her hands, wiping away tears with her thumbs. "Never," she said, her voice fierce with conviction. No matter what happens, I will always protect you. I promise. She held Lily until the child fell asleep again, then settled into the chair beside the bed. She knew tomorrow would bring consequences. She knew Victoria would be furious. But she could not abandon this little girl. She could not lose another child. Not again. Never again. In the secret room, Dante watched the monitor in silence. He saw Sienna sitting beside his daughter's bed, occasionally reaching out to stroke Lily's hair with infinite tenderness. Her eyes were tired but watchful, a guardian keeping vigil through the darkest hours. And he wondered, how could someone who had been hurt so deeply still love so fiercely? While Sienna kept watch over Lily, Dante reached for the encrypted phone beside his chair. He pressed the earpiece deeper into his ear and spoke in a low voice. Marcus, I need everything on Victoria Ashford. And I mean everything. Birth records, family history, financial transactions, past relationships. Dig deeper than anyone has ever dug before. Marcus's reply was immediate. How deep, boss? Deep enough to find out if she is even who she claims to be. The next several hours crawled by like years. Dante did not sleep. He watched the monitors, switching between cameras, observing Victoria sleep peacefully in her silk sheets, while Sienna remained vigilant beside his daughter's bed. Two women under the same roof, one a predator, one a protector. Dawn broke over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. And then Marcus's voice crackled through the earpiece. Boss, you need to hear this. Talk. Marcus took a deep breath before delivering the information that would change everything. Victoria Ashford does not exist. The real Victoria Ashford died 4 years ago in a yacht accident off the coast of Monaco. Her body was never recovered, and the family kept her death private due to the circumstances. Dante's jaw tightened. Then who is the woman in my house? Her real name is Victoria Mason, born in Detroit. Father was Raymond Mason, a notorious con artist who ran scams across 6 states before dying in prison. He trained her from childhood. She was running her first con by the time she was 15. What else? She has a history. 3 wealthy men in the past 8 years. The first one lost everything and ended up bankrupt. The second one had a mental breakdown and is still in a psychiatric facility. Marcus paused. The third one is dead, officially ruled a suicide. Gunshot wound to the head. But there were inconsistencies in the case that were never investigated properly. The words hung in the air like poison. So she is not just a fraud, Dante said slowly. She might be a murderer. That is what the evidence suggests. Boss. Dante ended the call and sat in the darkness of the secret room, his mind processing everything he had learned. He looked at the small photograph he kept in his wallet. Isabella, smiling at the camera on their wedding day. Beautiful, kind, genuine Isabella, who had died bringing their daughter into the world. I am sorry, he whispered to her image. I almost brought a devil into our home. I almost let her destroy everything we built. He slid the photograph back into his wallet and stood up. His reflection stared back at him from the darkened monitor screen. Cold eyes, hard face, the face of a man who had built an empire on blood and ruthlessness. She wants to play games with a Romano? Dante spoke to the empty room, his voice cold enough to freeze the air itself. Then let me show her what it means to be played. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the mansion windows, but Victoria's mood had grown darker with each passing hour. She had expected Lily to be broken by now. After everything Victoria had put her through, the child should have been a trembling mess, hiding in corners, afraid of her own shadow. Instead, the little brat seemed almost happy. Victoria had watched from the doorway that morning as Lily ate breakfast with a smile on her face. She had heard the child humming a little song while playing with her dolls. She had seen the light in those eyes, the same defiant light that reminded her of Isabella. It was infuriating. The nanny was to blame, of course. Despite Victoria's threats, despite the warning about Emma, Sienna was still somehow giving Lily the comfort and care that kept the child's spirit alive. Victoria could see it in the way Lily looked at Sienna, with trust and love that should have been directed at her. By afternoon, Victoria's patience had shattered completely. She waited until Sienna went downstairs to prepare Lily's afternoon snack, then made her move. Her heels clicked against the marble floor as she strode toward Lily's room, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. She did not knock. She simply pushed the door open and stepped inside. Lily was sitting at her small desk by the window, crayons scattered around her, completely absorbed in a drawing. She did not notice Victoria's entrance until a shadow fell across her paper. The little girl looked up, and the joy in her eyes immediately transformed into fear. Victoria snatched the drawing from the desk and examined it with narrowed eyes. A simple picture, drawn with the clumsy hand of a 4-year-old, 3 figures standing in front of a house with a bright yellow sun overhead. A tall man with dark hair, Daddy, a small girl with pigtails, Lily, and a woman with brown hair and a kind smile, holding the little girl's hand. The name written underneath in wobbly letters, Miss Sienna. There was no Victoria anywhere in the picture. "What is this?" Victoria's voice came out as a hiss. Lily shrank back in her chair. "It is my family." "Your family?" Victoria's grip on the paper tightened until her knuckles turned white. "You dare to put that servant in your family picture but not me?" I. Lily's eyes filled with tears. Victoria tore the drawing in half, then tore it again, and again. The pieces fluttered to the floor like wounded butterflies. "No!" Lily scrambled off her chair and fell to her knees, desperately trying to gather the fragments. "I worked so hard on that. I spent the whole week drawing it for Daddy." Victoria watched the child crawl on the floor, sobbing over scraps of paper, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. She reached down and grabbed Lily by the arm, yanking her to her feet. "Let me teach you who your real mother is going to be." She raised her hand, ready to strike. But that slap never reached Lily, because at that exact moment, the door burst open, and a small figure rushed in like a bolt of lightning. Sienna had been in the kitchen when she heard Lily scream. The sound cut through her like a knife. She dropped the tray she was holding and ran, up the stairs, down the hallway, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. She reached Lily's room just as Victoria's hand was descending toward the little girl's face. Sienna did not think. She simply moved. She threw herself between Victoria and Lily, wrapping her arms around the child and spinning so that her own back faced the attack. Victoria's palm connected with the side of Sienna's head instead, the blow so hard it made her vision blur. "You want to hit someone?" Sienna's voice was steady despite the pain exploding through her skull. "Hit me. Do not touch Lily." Victoria's eyes widened with disbelief, then narrowed with pure hatred. "You dare?" The second blow came fast, striking Sienna across the face. Then a third, a fourth. Victoria's hands became weapons, raining down slaps and punches with the fury of a woman who had completely lost control. Sienna did not fight back. She could not while her arms were wrapped around Lily, shielding the child from every strike. She hunched her shoulders and bent her body into a protective shell, absorbing each blow with her back, her arms, her head. Blood began to drip from her split lip. Her cheek swelled where Victoria's ring had cut into the flesh. Pain screamed through every nerve in her body, but she did not let go of Lily, not for a single second. "Stop!" Lily's voice rose in a desperate wail. "Please stop hurting Miss Sienna. Please." The child's cries only seemed to enrage Victoria further. She grabbed a handful of Sienna's hair and yanked her head back, forcing Sienna to look at her. "I will kill both of you," Victoria screamed, her face twisted into something barely human. "Do you hear me? I will kill you both." Sienna felt Lily trembling against her chest, the little girl's tears soaking through her shirt. She lowered her mouth to Lily's ear and whispered, her voice impossibly gentle despite everything. "Close your eyes, sweetheart. Do not look. I am here. I have got you." Lily buried her face in Sienna's chest and squeezed her eyes shut. Victoria's assault continued for what felt like hours. Her arms eventually grew tired, her breathing ragged. She stepped back, chest heaving, and stared at the scene before her. Sienna was on her knees, still holding Lily, her face covered in blood and bruises. Her clothes were torn. Her body was shaking. But she had not fallen. She had not surrendered. She had not let go of the child. "What are you?" Victoria whispered, something flickering in her eyes that might have been fear. "What the hell are you?" Sienna slowly raised her head. Her brown eyes met Victoria's gaze without a trace of submission, without a hint of defeat. In those eyes burned something that Victoria had never seen in any servant, any victim, anyone she had ever crushed beneath her heel. Unbreakable resolve. "I am the one who will protect this child," Sienna said quietly, "no matter the cost." Victoria stumbled backward, suddenly terrified of the bloodied woman kneeling before her. For the first time in her life, she felt afraid of someone she considered beneath her. She turned and fled from the room, her heels clattering frantically against the floor. She did not know that every second of what had just happened had been recorded. In the secret room, Dante sat frozen before the monitors. His whole body trembled, not with rage this time, not with the cold fury that had sustained him through 17 years of blood and war. This was something different, something he had not felt since the night Isabella died in his arms. He looked down at his hands. Blood dripped from his palms where his fingernails had dug deep into the flesh. He had not even noticed the pain. All he could see, all he could think about, was the image burned into his mind. Sienna on her knees, Sienna covered in blood, Sienna holding his daughter like a mother tiger protecting her cub, refusing to let go even as Victoria beat her senseless. Dante had hired her 2 years ago. He had seen her face in the hallways hundreds of times. He had nodded at her in passing, maybe exchanged a few polite words, but he had never truly seen her. To him, she had been just another employee, another shadow in a house full of shadows. And yet this shadow had done what he had failed to do for 4 years. She had protected Lily. She had loved Lily. She had bled for Lily. Dante's mind drifted to Isabella, his beautiful wife, who had dreamed of holding their daughter, who had spent 9 months talking to her belly, singing lullabies, making plans for a future she would never see. Isabella had died on the delivery table, her last words a whispered plea, "Take care of our baby." He had tried. God knew he had tried, but he was a mafia boss, not a mother. He did not know how to braid hair or kiss away nightmares. He did not know how to fill the emptiness that Isabella's death had left in their daughter's heart. He had thought Victoria could do that. He had believed her lies about wanting to be a mother to Lily. He had trusted her when she said she loved his daughter. And all along, the person who truly loved Lily had been right in front of him, a broken girl with scars on her wrists and pain in her eyes, who had nothing in the world except a dying sister and a heart full of love she kept giving away. Something wet rolled down Dante's cheek. He touched his face and stared at his fingers in disbelief. Tears. He was crying. For the first time since Isabella's funeral, he was actually crying. Not because of Victoria's betrayal, not because of the money Richard had stolen, not because of the murder they had planned. He was crying because of a girl who had lost everything and still found the strength to love. Because of a stranger who was willing to die for his daughter when he was not even there to protect her himself. "Enough," Dante whispered, his voice cracking. "This ends now." He picked up his phone and dialed Marcus. His hand was still trembling, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "Change of plans. I am coming back tomorrow. And prepare a family dinner." The morning sun had barely risen over Chicago when the sound of an engine shattered the quiet of the Romano estate. Victoria was sitting in the dining room with Richard, enjoying a leisurely breakfast and discussing their plans for the money they would soon control. They had grown careless over the past few days, comfortable in their belief that Dante was hundreds of miles away in Las Vegas. The roar of the Rolls-Royce coming up the driveway turned Victoria's blood to ice. "He is back," she gasped, her coffee cup freezing halfway to her lips. "He is back early." Richard's face went pale. He knocked over his chair in his haste to stand, eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal seeking escape. "The back door," Victoria hissed. "Go through the garden. Do not let anyone see you." Richard did not need to be told twice. He grabbed his jacket and fled through the rear entrance, disappearing into the maze of hedges just as the front door opened. Victoria took a deep breath, forcing her racing heart to slow. She smoothed her hair, adjusted her silk robe, and painted on the smile she had perfected over years of deception. By the time she reached the foyer, she looked every inch the loving fiancé eager to welcome her man home. Dante stepped through the door, and for a moment, Victoria's breath caught in her throat. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and powerful frame. His dark hair was slicked back, his jaw freshly shaved. He looked like he had stepped out of a magazine cover. He also looked like a predator who had scented blood. "My love!" Victoria rushed toward him, throwing her arms around his neck. "You are back so early. I missed you so much." She pressed her lips to his cheek, expecting the warmth she had learned to fake so well. Instead, she felt him stiffen almost imperceptibly before returning her embrace. Dante kissed her forehead. His lips were cold. His arms around her felt mechanical, as if he were holding a stranger. "I missed Lily," he said, his voice perfectly calm. "And I missed you." Victoria pulled back and searched his face for any sign of suspicion, but his expression was unreadable, a mask of stone that revealed nothing. "How was Las Vegas?" she asked brightly. "Did the business deal go well?" "Very well." Dante removed his coat and handed it to a waiting servant without looking at the man. "Better than expected, actually. I learned a great deal." Victoria felt a flicker of unease, but she pushed it aside. She was being paranoid. There was no way he could know anything. "I was thinking," Dante continued, his steel-gray eyes meeting hers, "we should have a family dinner tonight. You, me, Lily, Sienna, and Richard. I want to thank everyone who has been taking care of my household while I was away." Victoria's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second at the mention of Sienna and Richard, but she recovered quickly, nodding with enthusiasm. "That sounds wonderful, darling." Dante looked at her with eyes that, If Victoria had been paying closer attention, she would have recognized as the eyes of a man standing at the gates of hell, but she did not see it. And that was the last mistake she would ever make. The dining room had been transformed into something from a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. White candles flickered beneath the grand crystal chandelier, their flames casting dancing shadows across walls draped in deep crimson. White roses filled crystal vases at the center of the long mahogany table, their sweet perfume hanging heavy in the air. The finest china had been laid out, the silverware polished to a mirror shine. Everything was perfect, everything was beautiful, and the atmosphere was suffocating. Victoria sat at Dante's right hand, wearing a scarlet dress that clung to her curves like blood on a blade. She had spent hours preparing for this dinner, applying makeup to hide the stress lines around her eyes, choosing jewelry that sparkled with false innocence. She smiled and laughed and played her role flawlessly. But inside, something felt wrong. Across the table, Richard was drowning in his own sweat. His collar seemed too tight, his breathing too shallow. The air conditioning kept the room cool, yet dark patches spread beneath his arms, and his hands trembled every time he reached for his wine glass. Lily sat beside Sienna, her small fingers wrapped tightly around the nanny's hand. She had not let go since they entered the dining room, as if Sienna were the only anchor keeping her from floating away into the sea of tension that filled the space. Sienna kept her eyes lowered, painfully aware of the bruises that still marked her face. She had tried to cover them with makeup, but the purple and yellow shadows remained visible, silent testimony to what had happened in Lily's bedroom. She did not know why Dante had insisted she attend this dinner. She did not know what was about to unfold. Dante sat at the head of the table like a king surveying his court. His face betrayed nothing. His voice remained pleasant as he made small talk about his trip to Las Vegas, about the weather, about meaningless things that filled the silence without revealing anything. He raised his glass of red wine and smiled at the assembled faces. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, and I want to thank all of you for taking care of my household while I was away." Victoria beamed at him. Richard managed a nervous nod. Sienna kept her eyes on her plate. Lily pressed closer to her nanny's side. The servants brought course after course: soup, salad, roasted lamb, vegetables prepared by the mansion's private chef. The food was exquisite, but no one seemed to taste it. The conversation was sparse, punctuated by long stretches of uncomfortable silence. When dessert arrived, Dante rose from his chair. "Before we finish," he said, his voice carrying easily through the quiet room, "I have a special gift for everyone. A presentation, if you will. Something I put together during my trip." He picked up a small remote from beside his plate and pressed a button. The large screen mounted on the wall behind him flickered to life. The first image that appeared made Victoria's heart stop. It was her and Richard, locked in a passionate embrace in the center of the main hall. Their lips pressed together, their bodies intertwined, recorded in perfect clarity by the mansion's security cameras. The wineglass slipped from Victoria's fingers and shattered on the marble floor, red liquid spreading like blood across the white tiles. But that was nothing compared to what was about to break in the next few minutes. The video continued without mercy. The screen showed Victoria storming into Lily's room, her face twisted with rage. It showed her snatching the family drawing from the little girl's hands, tearing it to pieces while Lily sobbed on the floor. It showed her raising her hand to strike a 4-year-old child, and then it showed Sienna bursting through the door, throwing herself between Victoria and Lily, taking blow after blow while shielding the crying child with her own body. Victoria's voice rang out through the speakers, crystal clear, undeniable. "You are a burden. Everything would be so much easier without you." The scene shifted to the living room, where Victoria and Richard sat together on the red velvet sofa, planning their future built on stolen money and murder. 15 million to Switzerland. After the wedding, we will send the brat to a boarding school. Accidents happen all the time. In 2 years, everything will be ours. Richard could not take it anymore. He leaped to his feet, knocking his chair backward with a crash, and sprinted toward the door. He made it 3 steps before he found his path blocked by 6 men in black suits, their faces cold and expressionless. Marcus stood at their center, arms crossed, eyes promising violence. Victoria whirled on Dante, her carefully constructed mask finally crumbling to reveal the monster beneath. "You spied on me?" she screamed, her voice shrill with desperation. "You did not trust me?" Dante remained perfectly still, perfectly calm. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost gentle, which made it all the more terrifying. "No, I did trust you. That was my mistake." He rose from his chair and walked slowly toward her, each step deliberate, predatory. "But here is what I find most interesting, Victoria. He paused, letting the name hang in the air. Or should I call you by your real name? Victoria's face went white. Victoria Ashford died 4 years ago in a yacht accident off Monaco, Dante continued, his steel-gray eyes boring into hers. You are Victoria Mason, daughter of Raymond Mason, the con artist from Detroit. You have been stealing identities and destroying lives since you were 15 years old. The words hit Victoria like physical blows. 5 years of careful planning, 5 years of building a perfect false identity, 5 years of becoming someone else. All of it collapsed in an instant. Richard fell to his knees, blubbering, words tumbling out of his mouth in a desperate flood. It was her idea. All of it. The money, the forged documents, everything. She made me do it. Please, Dante. I will give back every penny. Just let me go. Victoria stared at him with disgust, then suddenly lunged across the room toward Sienna. This is all your fault, she shrieked, fingers curved into claws. You ruined everything. Marcus moved like lightning, intercepting Victoria before she could reach the nanny. He grabbed her arms and twisted them behind her back, holding her immobile despite her thrashing. Dante did not even glance at the struggle. His eyes remained fixed on Victoria's face as he delivered his final verdict. Take them away. They will learn what it means to betray a Romano. Victoria screamed as Marcus and his men dragged her toward the door. She cursed. She begged. She threatened. Her shrieks echoed through the hallways, growing fainter as they pulled her deeper into the mansion's depths. But in the dining room, Lily heard none of it. The little girl had fallen asleep in Sienna's arms sometime during the chaos, exhausted by days of fear and trauma. She slept peacefully now, her head resting against the nanny's chest, small fingers still clutching Sienna's shirt. Safe at last. 1 week passed, and the Romano mansion transformed into something it had not been in years. Peace. The dark cloud that had hung over the estate lifted like morning fog, burned away by sunlight. The servants walked with lighter steps. The gardens seemed brighter. Even the air felt easier to breathe. Victoria and Richard were gone, erased from Dante's world as thoroughly as if they had never existed. But they were not dead. When Marcus had asked what should be done with them, Dante had given an answer that surprised everyone. Death is too easy, he had said, his voice cold and final. I want them to live. I want them to wake up every morning knowing they have lost everything. I want them to spend the rest of their miserable lives remembering what they could have had and what they threw away. Victoria's true identity had been exposed to every powerful family in Chicago. The money she and Richard had stolen was recovered and returned. Every door that had once opened for Victoria Ashford now slammed shut in the face of Victoria Mason. She had been cast out into a world where her name meant nothing but shame. Richard fared no better. His career was destroyed, his reputation ruined, his family disowned him. The last anyone heard, he was working as a dishwasher in some nameless diner, jumping at shadows, terrified that one day the Romano family would decide that living was too good for him after all. But in the mansion, life was beginning again. Lily smiled more with each passing day. She laughed at breakfast, chattered during lunch, and actually asked for bedtime stories at night. The withdrawn, frightened child was slowly emerging from her shell, reaching toward the light she had been denied for so long, and she never let Sienna out of her sight. Sienna had been moved from the cramped basement room to a proper bedroom on the second floor, a real room with windows that overlooked the garden, with a comfortable bed and soft curtains and space to breathe. She had protested at first, insisting she did not need such luxury, but Dante had simply looked at her with those steel-gray eyes until she stopped arguing. One afternoon, Dante called her to his office. Sienna entered nervously, still unsure of her place in this new order. The bruises on her face had faded to pale yellow shadows, but the memories remained fresh. Dante sat behind his massive oak desk, watching her with an expression she could not read. From now on, he said quietly, you are not the nanny. You are family. Sienna blinked, certain she had misheard. I do not understand. I am just what? Dante leaned forward, his gaze intense. You are the person who protected my daughter with your own life. You took beatings meant for her. You bled for her. You loved her when I was not here to do it myself. He stood and walked around the desk until he was standing in front of her. You are not just anything, Sienna. Do you understand me? Sienna stood frozen, unable to process his words. For 26 years, she had been nothing. A victim, a survivor, a shadow. No one had ever looked at her and seen anything worth keeping. But what Dante said next shattered her completely. Dante reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a folder, placing it on the polished wood between them. Your sister, he said. Emma. Sienna's heart stopped. The sound of that name on his lips sent ice through her veins. How did he know about Emma? What had he discovered? Her mind raced through terrible possibilities, each one worse than the last. Her surgery has been scheduled for next week, Dante continued, his voice calm but warm. At Northwestern Memorial Hospital, the best cardiac unit in Chicago, the best surgeons in the country. Sienna stared at him, unable to comprehend what she was hearing. All expenses have been covered. The surgery, the recovery, the long-term care, everything. She will have the best room, the best doctors, the best chance at a full and healthy life. The words hit Sienna like a wave, knocking the breath from her lungs. Her knees buckled, and she sank to the floor, tears streaming down her face. Why? She choked out, her voice breaking on the single syllable. Why would you do this for me? Dante knelt in front of her, bringing himself to her level. He reached out and gently lifted her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. For 4 years, he said softly, I have been searching for someone who could love Lily the way her mother would have, someone who could give her the warmth and protection that I, with all my power and money, could never provide. He paused, his steel-gray eyes softening in a way Sienna had never seen. You do not just love Lily. You were willing to die for her. You took beatings that would have broken most people, and you never let go of her. Not once. Not for a single second. Sienna shook her head, tears falling onto the carpet. I did not do anything special. I could not let her be hurt. I could not lose another child. That is exactly what makes you special. Dante's voice was thick with emotion he rarely showed. What you did cannot be bought with money. It cannot be purchased or negotiated or demanded. It can only be given freely, from a heart that knows how to love despite being broken. He helped her to her feet, his hands surprisingly gentle for a man known for his ruthlessness. I cannot repay what you did for my daughter, but I can start by giving your sister a chance to live. Before Sienna could respond, the office door burst open, and a small body launched itself at her legs. Miss Sienna! Lily wrapped her arms around Sienna's waist, her face glowing with joy. Daddy said you are staying forever. Is it true? You are never leaving? Sienna dropped to her knees and pulled Lily into a tight embrace. The tears were still flowing, but now they were tears of something she had almost forgotten how to feel. Happiness. Forever, Lily, she whispered against the little girl's hair. I promise. I am never going anywhere. Lily squeezed her tighter. I love you, Miss Sienna. I love you too, sweetheart. So much. Dante stood watching his 2 girls hold each other, their tears mingling, their hearts healing together. And for the first time in 4 years, since the day Isabella had closed her eyes and never opened them again, he felt something shift in his chest. This house finally felt like a home. 1 year later, the Romano mansion had transformed into something no one could have imagined. Laughter echoed through the hallways where silence once reigned. The gardens bloomed with flowers that Lily and Emma had planted together, their small hands covered in dirt, their faces bright with joy. The darkness that had once suffocated this house had been replaced by warmth and light. Emma had recovered beautifully from her surgery. The little girl who had once lain pale and weak in a hospital bed now ran through the gardens with energy that seemed boundless. Her heart, once broken, now beat strong and steady. She had moved into the mansion 3 months after the operation, taking the room next to Sienna's, becoming part of a family she never dreamed she would have. Lily and Emma had become inseparable. They played together, argued over toys, shared secrets under blankets at night, and loved each other with the fierce devotion that only children understand. They called each other sister, and no one corrected them, because that was exactly what they were. On a warm evening in late summer, Dante and Sienna stood on the balcony overlooking the garden, watching the 2 girls chase fireflies across the lawn. The sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and rose, casting a gentle glow over everything it touched. Dante turned to look at Sienna. Her brown hair was loose around her shoulders, her eyes bright with a peace she had never known before. The scars on her wrists were still there, pale lines that told the story of her darkest moments. But she no longer hid them. They were part of her, part of the journey that had brought her here. 4 years ago, Dante said quietly, when Isabella died, I thought my heart had died with her. I thought I would never feel anything again except duty and revenge. Sienna looked at him, waiting. But you proved me wrong. His voice was thick with emotion. You walked into my life, and you brought light into places I thought would be dark forever. You are the light I do not deserve. Sienna reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his jaw. You do not need to deserve it, she whispered. You just need to be here. Dante leaned down, and their lips met in a kiss that tasted like hope and healing. Below them, Lily and Emma giggled and pointed, their young voices rising in delighted squeals. 3 months later, on a crisp autumn afternoon, they stood beneath the old oak tree in the garden. It was a simple ceremony, nothing like the extravagant affair Dante had once planned with Victoria. Just family, just love, just truth. Lily served as the flower girl, scattering rose petals with solemn concentration. Emma carried the rings on a small silk pillow, her face glowing with pride. Marcus stood beside Dante, a rare smile softening his usually stern features. When it came time for vows, Dante took Sienna's hands in his and spoke words that came from the deepest part of his heart. "I promise to love you and protect you," he said, his steel-gray eyes shining, "the way you have loved and protected my daughter. I promise to be your shelter in every storm, your strength in every weakness, your home for all the days of my life." Sienna smiled through her tears. "And I promise to stand beside you, to love Lily as my own, and to build a family with you that is founded on truth, trust, and unconditional love." They kissed as husband and wife while Lily and Emma cheered. In a world full of darkness and betrayal, sometimes the truest light does not come from wealth or power. It comes from the hearts of people who have walked through the darkest nights and still choose to shine. This story reminds us never to judge anyone by their appearance or social status. A humble nanny like Sienna can carry a heart of pure gold, while a polished heiress like Victoria can hide a cruel soul inside. Look at how someone treats the vulnerable, the ones who cannot offer them anything in return. That is the true measure of character. And remember, no matter how hard life gets, no matter how much suffering you are forced to endure, do not ever let it extinguish the light inside you, because that light will guide you to the people who truly deserve you, to the happiness you deserve. Sometimes the most broken hearts find each other in the darkness, heal each other, and walk together into the light. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button and share this video with someone you love. We would love to hear your thoughts. So please leave a comment below telling us which moment moved you the most. Have you ever met someone like Sienna? Someone who endured so much pain, yet still kept a kind heart? Or have you ever been rescued from the darkness by someone unexpected? Share your story with us. We truly value every comment that comes from the deepest part of your heart. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss the heartfelt stories we bring you every day. We wish all of you watching this video good health, happiness, and peace in every day of your life. May you always find light in the darkness and love in unexpected places. Thank you for being here with us. Goodbye, and we will see you in the next story.